Okay, so during the intro sequence, we not only see someone who looks an awful lot like Duke Nukem, but he's also talking about chrome grills and exhaust pipes. I'm just gonna let that thought sit with you for a moment. You know, I really want to like today's game, but I don't know, man. This game's got some serious issues. Not so much in terms of gameplay, just overall. And today's Ancient DOS game is Roketz, and I've been debating for quite a while now whether or not to take a look at this game. Partly because it feels like something I would have made myself given half the chance, but also because I can't really even figure out whether this game saw an actual release or not. Now, I do know for certain that the Amiga version came out with an official release. It's just this DOS port which I'm having trouble finding info on. I know there was a publisher selected, I just don't know whether they actually published it or not. Not helped by the fact that the version you can get nowadays calls itself a preview version, which is just one more reason why I was questioning showing this game. But the other side of that is that there's a lot of potential in what's here, and it's not like it's a hard game to get nowadays. Plus, it plays much better with a second player, and has some interesting things going on about it. So, you know, what the heck? Let's give it a look and see where we end up. Roketz was originally created by The Farm for Amiga computers, while the DOS port was primarily developed by Blue Moon Software, the same company that made Skyroads. And if it was published as intended, it would have happened through Magicom Multimedia in 1997. However, I can't find any evidence that this actually happened, so it's entirely possible this DOS port never saw the light of day as a commercial release. It's a 0 to 2 player shooter/racing game, and runs in one of the strangest video modes I have ever seen. Now, there's a reason why most games run in resolutions of 320 by 200 or 640 by 480, and that's because these resolutions had well-accepted standards, most monitors could display them properly, and earlier video hardware couldn't handle anything but these specific resolutions in the first place. Roketz, however, runs in a 256 color VGA mode at 360 by 350 resolution. Your guess is as good as mine as to why they picked something as bizarre as that. As for audio support, it supports digitized PC speaker sound and music, Sound Blaster cards, Pro Audio Spectrum cards, and the Gravis Ultrasound. The Sound Blaster support is the simplest to get working, so that's the mode I recommend. As for its current release state, Blue Moon Interactive made the preview edition free to download at some point and can be grabbed from their website at www.bluemoon.ee. The gameplay in Roketz is a bit like Gravitar on the Atari 2600, where you fly around from a side view, but your ship spins in 360 degrees from an overhead perspective. It can be a bit weird at first, but by having it work this way, the game is able to incorporate gravity, causing your ship, among other things, to slowly fall to the ground. This means you're constantly fighting against the force of gravity while you play, which is kind of a mixed opinion sort of thing. Some people love this kind of gameplay, while some people hate it. I feel if it's done really well, it can be fun, but a lot of games that take this approach are designed to be brutally difficult, and Roketz is no exception. At least if you're playing solo against a computer. Before starting a match, you have to choose 2 players and set them up. When selecting your own player, you can buy and sell equipment for your ship. This equipment comes in the form of an engine for speed, guns to shoot with, missiles and other ordnances, extra items to provide bonus capabilities, fuel, ammunition, missile capability, and shields, which obviously keep you alive. Eventually, you can even upgrade the ship itself to better models which have higher maximum capabilities and can load in more extras. If playing with a second player, they would do the same, but against the AI, you typically just set player 2 to be a CPU player. While there are several different CPU pilots to choose from, the only one that will allow you to advance in the game and earn any money is the private CPU pilot, as all other selections are mostly just for testing things out. The private CPU pilot upgrades their equipment from earned money the same way you do, and is tracked different for each pilot you create. Unfortunately, this creates a situation where eventually, depending on how often you win or lose, the CPU pilot may get substantially stronger than you, to the point where winning matches will be nearly impossible. Before you actually begin a match though, you have to set the scene and mission parameters. There are 9 scenes in total you can choose from, but 8 of them are locked at first and have to be unlocked through a ton of gameplay. After several dozen matches, I was only able to unlock 2 additional scenes, so I have no idea what the remaining 6 are like. As for the mission parameters, you're basically deciding whether to engage in combat or a race, and set either how many lives each player has or how many laps need to be completed to win. You can also set a bet too, which is kind of a weird thing and barely has much of an effect on anything since I've never actually lost any money using this feature. Yeah, try it out if you want to. Combat in this game works as you might expect, with some interesting twists. All of the weapons in this game fire particles, as opposed to graphically interesting effects. While some weapons are really basic and thus don't end up looking like anything special, these particle effects do come into play heavily with a few of the weapons, including some special bombs which can flood an area with damaging particles, grenades which explode into clouds of particles, and many of the guns you can buy have shots which bounce off of the walls, meaning you have to be careful not to end up shooting yourself trying to hit your opponent. I will admit, I like the fact that there's an emphasis on particle effects in this game, but there's only really 2 colors of particles, gray and white. Suffice to say, it's really easy to get confused when particles start flooding an area, making it impossible to tell which particles are dangerous and which aren't. And some more colors would have been nice at the least. In the corner, you have a box showing you your stats, all of which can be restored by landing somewhere flat. Though while most flat surfaces work out well enough, there are a few that don't, even though they look like they should. When in doubt, touch down where you or your opponent spawn from if you want to restore your stats for sure. Player versus player combat tends to work out better than facing the AI, because the AI is relentless. Their shots almost never miss, and as such, weapons that would only be marginally powerful with 2 real people playing against each other become completely overpowered in the hands of the AI. In order to win combat against the computer opponent basically comes down to a lot of trickery and patience, plus staying out of the computer's line of fire as much as possible. Suffice to say, I'm not a fan of the combat in this game. Thankfully, it's not the only way you can play. The racing aspect of this game is far more fun than the combat aspect, especially when up against the computer. The idea is that you have to hit certain checkpoints in order, most of which are arranged to form a circuit of some kind. Every time you respawn, your progress through the checkpoints resets, so the trick to getting ahead of your opponent is to destroy them before they can complete a circuit, and if you're gonna get destroyed, try to make sure it happens just after completing a circuit. Of course, the racing aspect of the game really brings up the whole fuel consumption thing, as you'll often need to land somewhere to get your fuel back, or if you're lucky, you'll run into a fuel refilling power-up when you need it the most. Plus, it really is about hitting the right checkpoints in the right order, not how you get to those checkpoints. Occasionally, you may see a computer opponent take advantage of this fact, going out of their way to find a flat place to refuel or repair because they aren't going to make it to the next checkpoint if they don't, or even taking a backwards route to reach a checkpoint because it's faster from where they are than going the usual way. One of the things that's kind of annoying for both game modes, though, is that when playing single player, you can only see the progress of yourself, not your opponent. Thus, you can't keep track of how far ahead or behind you are in laps or how many lives your opponent has left in combat. In 2-player mode, this isn't a big deal, since both players' stats will be on the screen at the same time, so this seems more like a minor oversight than an intentional hindrance. I think the biggest tip I can give people who want to try this game for themselves is to go through their first playthrough as a sort of test run, just to get used to the controls and everything, because the AI is not only going to slaughter you, but will rapidly get more and more powerful. Heck, even if you know how to play this game, there seems to be some problem with the scoring, where half the time the loser will get more money than the winner, which just doesn't make any sense at all. I'm guessing it's a bug of some kind because it's just plain weird. All that said, you're better off playing with a friend than against the AI. Another useful tip is to try out all the different weapons and such so you can get an idea of how they all work and which ones you prefer using. Of course, you'll need to build up quite a bit of money through substantial amounts of gameplay if you want to actually try everything, but sooner or later you'll figure out your preferred equipment. Well, one last thing I want to quickly mention too is that it's possible to watch the AI fight itself. Now when you do this, you get to see special numbers for each AI player indicating what they're trying to do. My guess is that this was a debugging feature, as having numbers like this is a common way of testing out complicated AI routines, even in games nowadays. Yeah, I didn't really end up with much to talk about today. Roketz is an incredibly basic game on the surface, and despite all of its content, having everything locked, having the AI being extremely difficult, and having to spend hours playing the game to get access to new items and scenes just doesn't appeal to me. That said, the game's free to download now, so you can't really complain about that. It's quirky and weird, let's put it that way, and worth trying at least once just to experience how different it is as far as DOS games are concerned. But it's not a very appealing game, despite the effort that went into the interface visuals. And it's not well polished at all, so it's doubtful the game will hold your attention for very long. Thankfully, despite its quirks, the game's incredibly simple to set up in DOSBox. Just set cycles to max and you're good to go. Even the joystick support works without any extra configuration, though the joystick controls are kinda weird, so you may just want to use DOSBox's keymapper in place of the actual joystick support instead. Anywho, that's all for today's episode of Ancient DOS Games. Next week for episode 105, we're going to be taking a look at a fairly typical inventory-based adventure game, with one major difference. It also features real-time first-person shooting. And believe it or not, there's several games this could be. But I think I know which one most of you are going to guess, so make sure you send your guess as soon as you can to adg@pixelships.com and tune in next Saturday to see this game for yourself.